This is Spocko.
Spocko, how you doing, my friend? How you been?
I'm doing doing great, and you're just the topic tonight. I was listening to this, and I'm thinking, wow, I really need to get this call in, and
Oh, I
I
know
was
you are always on top of the ad industry as it pertains to media and entertainment. This is your forte.
yeah, and I was thinking today is like you covered so much of the great information in the main part of your podcast. I'm thinking, what is it that people need to hear, some additional information that they need to know and remember. And so I was looking back at the things that I had written about and read about. So what's fascinating to me, of course, is my history for this. And I'm not going to go to the whole history of me again. You can listen to one of Matt's podcasts where I talk about this. I
Right.
should actually know the dates of those. Um, but I wanted to say that back when I was contacting advertisers to let them know of the horrific comments that the host was making, my whole piece was these hosts are saying horrific things and then they're reading your ad. And so I
Right.
just, I copied the audio and I sent it to them and I said, "Listen, here's Lee Rogers saying something horrible and blowing people's brains out, and then he reads a United advertising commercial." I mean, so it's the same people. I told the United people it's almost like he's wearing the pilot's uniform while he is saying these terrible things. So the thing that's interesting is that the people at KSFO, which was owned by ABC Disney at the time, instead of telling the host to shut up, they did very much like what it was that Musk is. They attacked the people who were providing the information to the advertisers, and which was me and a few other people. And the other interesting thing was, now I do this as a pseudonym. Spocko's not my real name. And the reason I did it was because I know how these people act. They will go after you. They will dox you. They'll find out exactly what it is that you're associated with, and they will destroy you that way. And I was very careful about this. And I was saying to Nicole Sandler earlier that this has gotten worse. And you might have noticed this when I was looking at the responses to Elon Musk, besides, where he called Media Matters pure evil. Underneath that, somebody had posted one of the Media Matters employees who was a trans person. They put their dead name in previously, and that person's name was in there, and it is part of a huge stream that he has. I mean, he's got how many 100 million bots and 60 million real people following him, and that is the issue that I think also needs to be addressed, which is the harm that he is causing, not just himself, but the community, by not having any kind of controls on Twitter. Now, you had mentioned the lawsuit, which, by the way, thank you for much for going through that. In the back in December, and I pulled up an article from Reuters. He was telling the advertisers that, oh, we've got a whole new set of controls that will stop this bad language from being next to your paid advertisements. New controls. And the reason he did this is because they fired everybody. They fired the moderators, they fired the staff. So he figured he'd have a AI new thing that would use keywords and stuff that would stop it. And he sold this and pushed this to the advertisers and said, "Don't worry, that's not going to happen." Well, it didn't work. And so the thing that I also, I was pulling up the previous things from last year. They talked about how all these advertisers left and lost all the revenue. And one of the things that I know about is brand safety. And when a bunch of groups got together, and this included Media Matters, included the Free Press, it included your friend, my friend now too, from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and a group called Tech Accountability. They got and gathered a bunch of the same information, and they said, here is the reason that you should keep your brands off of Twitter. And a bunch of them left. And after that came out, they sued. I think he threatened to sue ADL first. And he said that he claimed that the ADL was the one that caused it. But they did sue. He did sue and is still a lawsuit with the Center for Countering Digital Hate right now. He did not sue ADL, but as we saw this morning, I guess, at his thermonuclear lawsuit, it came out. He has sued Media Matters, and very much like I was sued or threatened to be sued first by KSFO, ABC, Disney for the same reason. I alerted advertisers to the way that their ads were next to the horrific things that the hosts were saying. Here I feel like I'm talking at you. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to make sure that I covered the things that you have already covered a lot of it. What I'm thinking is what happens next, and to remind people that back it was in December, and then they did back in April when they put out a number of different new reports. Twitter just got worse and worse. And the people who were the advertisers, a lot of times they pause and then they kind of want to sneak back on. And Musk and what's the name of the new CEO? What's her name? Linda. I forget what her name was. She said that they were taking care of the advertisers. They were protected, and they just basically lied about this. And they lied about how many of the advertisers had come back. They're getting a bunch of, second-tier advertisers. And the difference between Elon Musk, who can allow a multiple advertisers to leave, is if he can say my principles are so much higher than trying to get revenue, then the keep your company brand safe so you can get revenue, that kind of goes away. It kind of disappears if he can say, well, I can make up the advertising revenue with with subscribers and memberships and charging people like this. And I think somebody in the chat made a comment like, how long would it take to bring up that $100 million that ad that you use from Apple? Well, if everybody subscribed for the next 20 years, it would still not be enough to make up hundreds of millions of dollars of lost revenue. So the question is, what are the other reasons that you could continue losing money? Well, if you don't care about getting money, if your overall goal is to push a different agenda, then you can define what it is that you consider winning. And in Musk's case, his definition about what is free speech is going to be in line with whatever his goal is to use this very powerful media platform to push various different agendas. And I don't want to push other podcasts beside The Scam Economy with your host, Matt Bender. I did listen to a great podcast by Charlie Jane Anders and Annalee Newert. They're the former founders of IO9, and they also were they're science fiction writers. And they did a great podcast about how 1984, the book got kind of used by the tech bros, and they took the wrong lesson away from it. But a big part of it is the way that they talked about how the use of language and the use of the fear and threat of punishment, how that was the part that was that's a big part of what the tech bros did in their process of trying to have free speech. And I'm going to link what has happened today with Musk in the lawsuit with people might have been heard about the most recent story where Fonnie Willis was talking about the violation of the pretrial release with Harrison Floyd, and that issue about his threats. He made new threats to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss by posting them on Twitter, and it was a fascinating, very unusual kind of discussion by the judges about, if you put an @ next to somebody, if you tag them, is that a direct contact or is it indirect? And I think you said earlier in the show, Matt, you said something about how the people in the legal world, they don't necessarily understand everything about social media and how it works, and they don't necessarily have an understanding of the tools. And then they fall into this, well, it's free speech, whereas it's been incumbent upon the prosecutors and some of the legal analysts to say, let's make clear distinctions on what is the difference between what you can say and who can say certain things when they're like out on bail, and what happens if they violate those, agreed rules. And if there is no consequences, no punishment, they just continue doing it. And the people like Musk and others, it comes out from Trump, they will keep repeating the lie that they're trying to censor me and they're trying to shut down all my speech. And there's too many times that the media and other people fall into this protecting, I almost call it like a knee-jerk reaction of saying, well, I believe in, free speech, etc. And the one good thing I think about a lot of what's happening right now, it's an education to the people about the legal process, but we also need to understand that the social media, all the people who are running the social media, they're still profiting off of this kind of speech. There's still people who are being intimidated and threatened by this kind of speech. And there is very little desire or understanding for legislation to come in and do something. And there is very little desire for the social media companies to do something. And as our friend Amron from the Center for Countering Digital Hate says, the social media companies just lie about what they can and can't do. There's a lot of tools that they have that they can use, and they're not using them because it would cost them money. So I'm trying to say, I feel like I'm lecturing, and I want to make sure that I am making certain things clear, because I've been through this process. I was threatened, and I was lucky that I had protected myself. I feel like I almost want to identify myself for real to come out and say, look, I media trained Elon Musk back before he was famous. I worked with him. I also worked with the founder of Media Matters. Matter of fact, I was kind of like his mentor. I trained him on the techniques that I used on KSFO. He used them, and we used them on Glenn Beck, and then later on Rush Limbaugh. And the power, the various different, what do you call the power differential between Musk and, or like when it was Disney as KSFO, is still very real. And unless we have some sort of ways to hold those people accountable and get them to stop, then they're going to kind of run over us roughshod. And financially was one of the few ways that we could use. But when you got somebody like Elon Musk, he doesn't care anymore.
Right. I mean, there's little. The problem with someone having as much power as him is that he doesn't care. There's nothing on the line for him. You know what I mean? Like, if Twitter doesn't work out, he's fine. So Twitter doesn't work out. That's his investor's problem. He's got SpaceX. He's got Tesla. He's fine. Like
And,
there's
and
no like there's no like that's
right.
the thing. Like the real any sort of real punishment for Musk's behavior. And I'm not talking about how he runs any platform. I'm talking about what he said, what he personally says and does. It is really going to be up to the U.S. government to decide. We're not going to work. He's a government contractor. We're not going to work with him anymore.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
only then will there be a punishment that sticks to Musk. Otherwise, he's in the clear.
And who's going to do that? It's like, again, this is very much. I think there was even an article about this. They talked about how
I mean, I don't know. I don't know any other government contractor who's allowed to openly, dabble in white supremacist conspirity theories in public.
Yeah, yeah. He controls the satellites. With this, he had the ability to turn off the satellites. I mean, I'm thinking this is this should be nationalized. I mean, this should not be a position for the one man to say, I think I just had a nice conversation with Putin. And he said that if I don't turn off those satellites, I might drop a nuke. And that's the other thing is, I've worked with these people. Like I said, when you reach this level of power, you think about the world very differently. And the tools that we have in order to rein somebody in, those people are also in this position of, well, if I go after Elon Musk, then we're going to lose our ability to get spaceships up to the International Space Station because SpaceX delivers the information. It was, who did we go to before? The Russians. So we had to go to the Russians because we had no ability to launch people up into space. And so that's the other thing is, if you wanted to do something, and there is one senator who has gone after and said, what can we do to rein Musk in? You go after his other entities. So Elizabeth Warren went to the CEO of Tesla and said, your executive the chairman of the board, your executive is violating his fiduciary responsibilities as the CEO of Tesla. And he needs to take care of this for the point of view of your board. And she had a number of different questions that they needed to provide while he's running Twitter. And I don't know what happened with that, but we now see that the Twitter, the board and a bunch of the users are saying, we want to disassociate ourselves from Musk because he's bad for our business. And you would need to do the same thing with his satellite company, with his with SpaceX, and you have to say who is going to do that, who is in the position to say it's bad and it's not something that we want to associate with. And you've got the fear of him retaliating in a way that's going to say, oh, you don't want your Ukrainian thing to go well? Well, maybe I'm just going to turn off the satellites. Don't mess with me.
Right. I mean, it's stunning how much power this guy, and you're like I think the satellite, Starlink issue is a major thing. I think it's probably one that most people are not focusing on, including myself. I really should focus on that more. We talk about Tesla because it's this big money maker. We talk about SpaceX because it gets all the headlines because it's probably, one of his one project that sort of actually does like keep people enamored. Like, ooh, rocket ship goes in the air, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like what's going to directly affect the everyone the most, it's those satellites. It's Starlink. It's what he's putting out. Like the fact that he owns all those satellites and he owns the most of them, and he's basically taking up this space in space. He's basically colonizing, the Earth's atmosphere, like around the Earth. I'm not a space person, so I don't know the exact terminology, but he's basically, this is all going to end up being his domain. Like there's going to be no one left by the time anyone catches up. There's not going to be any maneuvering for anyone to do but him. He's going to control the complete communications in the satellite space.
There's a number of science fiction stories that I've read where the same kind of, super powerful individuals who contain, who are control of certain industries, and there is a real fear of them, having control, but they don't know how to deal with it. And there was a great book by Daniel Suarez called Kill Decision, and at that point he talked about how bots and various different ways could be used to control the equivalent of Twitter, social media. And this is something that people don't necessarily always think about, which is right now, the Saudis are a huge investor in Twitter, in X, and they have a huge amount of money that they can just say, well, maybe this was bad. The Arab Spring was bad, and maybe we should be able to have some control over this. That's one of those things that people don't always talk about, which is how does Twitter drive media narratives? And Dan Gilmore on Mastodon constantly harps about the fact that all of these journalists are still, posting up on Twitter, and it's not like they have another place that they can go to, pitch their stories, because it's become this centralized locale, and there isn't another place that people can go to. And I think that's a real tragedy, but it is one of the reasons that instead of, getting rid of Musk, can you reform what was Twitter again? At this point, it almost feels like it's a lost cause, but there needs to be something else, because the media, they're not going to come out and, as you know, it's like, what are they going to do to you? They'll kick you off, but then people want to say, well, I got to reach the audience.
Right. Yeah. I don't even know what to say anymore. I don't know what he needs to do.
Do people want I think this is the thing, and I did a lot of research and connecting with what was going on in European, in terms of what their rules and regulations are, and they have things, but there are and they are possible to implement. The reason that there isn't anything happening in the U.S. is because, once again, it is the power of money in legislation in order to shut certain things down. And I like, again, the Center for Media and the Center for Countering Digital Hate did an incredibly great study about this and pointed out how the people who are profiting from the aggressive, the hate, etc., those people like Facebook, they like to have engagement. They like to have the attacks, and they know a lot about how it's being used to raise money, and they know how it's being used against people. And until there is a financial disincentives, they're not going to change. And before I go, and I feel like people are like, calling in now. Before I go, I would like to have a little shout out to my friends out there in the chat. One of the ways that I wanted to do is I wanted people to say there's something that you can do when you find out that people are being threatened and harassed online. And I did almost like, it wasn't a case study, but in Boise, Idaho, one of the politicians he ran for governor, Ammon Bundy, he had one of his supporters had his grandchild taken away for malnutrition, and then he took him to they took the child to the St. Luke's Hospital in Boise, and Bundy and his people got together and they came to the hospital and they protested with guns, and they had the whole hospital shut down, saying baby Cyrus has been kidnapped. And so I had been talking to some people in Idaho about this, because I knew that this is one of the ways that Bundy works, is they threaten people and they use the media to raise money. And so after they had shut down the hospital, eventually they left. And so I talked to them, and they said, I suggested that they file a civil lawsuit, a defamation lawsuit against them, and to track all the ongoing harassment that comes after they, leave the hospital. And so I talked to them. I actually talked to the lawyer who was representing St. Luke's. And I also talked to our friends at the Center for Media and Center for Countering Digital Hate. I talked to the people from the Idaho Project 97, and I said, we need to not just go after Bundy, but his organization and how he raises money, because his followers are going to just come out and make death threats. So I told the lawyer, you need to keep tracking all of the information when people get threatened, like the hospital staff get threatened. And then when you have the case before the court, you show them this damage not only just shut down the hospital, but this is all these people's lives were put in danger. And so Bundy denied he didn't do it, and so they did the case, and before it got settled, the lawyers brought 30 pages of all the death threats and harassment that came from Bundy followers. And the case they won a $52.5 million settlement. And it wasn't just Bundy that got the fine. It was the grandfather of this child, Bundy's organization, his People's Right group, and his super PAC for him running for governor. And they all had to pay millions of dollars. And I also said to the lawyer, you need to prepare for them the same way that you need to prepare for somebody like Alex Jones, who's going to try and hide his money. And so they did. And sure enough, Bundy tried to hide his money, and they got him with another suit. And they are holding him, and he just had another case where he gets held in contempt for not paying the money that he owes. And the reason I did this whole story is because I said this kind of tactics can be used for hospitals like Boston Children's Hospital and Vanderbilt Medical, where people who are being attacked, the staff are being attacked because they were providing gender-affirming care. And so I wanted to let those people in these hospitals know this is a method and methodology going after the people who are attacking your staff. You use the financial method, but it's also a way to get to the broader group of people who organized and implemented an attack on your hospital. And the only way that this gets to stop in America is when there's a huge financial penalty for doing this kind of work, because criminally it is really hard, because in America it seems like they love to lump in death threats with free speech, and they say, well, it's possible. In this case, you can clearly point to the damages that are being done to people and who is profiting from it. So that's my little I've been saving up that for a long time. So I appreciate you listening. And this is for some of the people who I've learned a lot from in the chat, that I want to let them know that this is part of the goal, is to not only protect the people who are being harmed, and not to let them people get away with it, and to make it so in a way that forces them to change their behavior, because in a lot of cases, when it's down to financial, that's when they really finally listen.
Right. Spocko, always a pleasure when you call in, because you're great. You always got... I mean, it's surprising to me that you don't host your own show. Not only you got the voice, but you have the entire segments down. Like, you should just be doing a show. You call in to do a segment, honestly.
I'm terrible at that.
You call in and you do a segment. It's great. It's great for me because I'm able to just listen. Especially when I'm coughing and choking on myself.
You are always ahead of the curve. Like, when I look at the people who bring up that I looked at and found, like the lawyer from Alejandro Cabrera, the lawyer, she calls the suit LOL suit, Musk's LOL suit, And you are the ones, like, you're always, like I say, 6 months ahead of what's going on because you know what's happening and you see what's coming forward. So you're the one who I look to find out, what's next. I try and uh, fill in the gaps and say, here's how it really happens, and here's how it can happen. And I try and be encouraging, because we as activists, I consider myself activist, we get disgusted and we get defeated, and it seems like nobody's ever going to get in trouble for the things that they do. And so I just like to bring, some positive things that have happened, that we've done, and we can make a difference. And it's all through people like you who help us. So thanks a lot.
No, thank you, Spocko, for the kind words and also for your knowledge when you call in. It's always a pleasure. Have a great night, and if you celebrate, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, bye.
Damn, guess you don't celebrate. uh, let's go back to the phones.